On to our speaker for today. Fascinated by how people and technology interact in shaping the world's future, Dr. Sunny Zhang spent the last 20 years focusing on innovation adoption, digital marketing, social networks, and international business as a researcher, educator, and entrepreneur. She is a marketing professor at the University of St. Thomas and the founder and president of Z-Lab, partnering with corporate and individual innovators to build and grow digital platforms. Dr. Zhang enjoys collaborating with various stakeholders in the entrepreneurial ecosystem, including startups, corporates, universities, and governments, and connecting otherwise disconnected networks among the global innovation community. Professor, welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks so much for the introduction, Johan. I really appreciate the opportunity. I always admire the great work by the World Affairs Council of Greater Houston. So it's been a really amazing journey, especially since COVID, to see the exciting events that you have been hosting to bring this diverse community together. So welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening to talk about the new era favoring entrepreneurial spirit. The reason I wanted to talk about this topic is because in the past few months, I'm seeing so many challenges, both in corporate innovation and startups. So I wanted to really invite everyone to join this discussion with me, and not just like sitting here. This is not a business school lecture. So I'd love to start by inviting everyone to give a brief introduction of yourself in the chat window. So this is a quick text swarm we're doing. I'd love to have everyone get to know each other, because usually when we attend an event in person, you're not only getting the interaction with the speaker, but also with peer-to-peer interaction as well. And I think that's been missing in a lot of online events. So I'd love to have everyone introduce yourself, your name, what you do, and where are you based, and just a quick introduction with your maybe LinkedIn, if you'd like to connect with each other, because I definitely want to make sure we're all connecting. So this is really the basis of entrepreneurial spirit, like reaching out, be resourceful, and making connections, utilize all kinds of resources in your own networks. So I'm gonna start sharing the slides of this presentation, but please, let's not be defined by these slides. I'd love to have these chat going so that we can continue with discussion. So please feel free to have your questions and thoughts along the presentation, so we don't have to wait till the end for Q&A. So I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I'll be checking with the chat window throughout the presentation. So I think everybody's already got to know me as a professor, but also entrepreneur. Essentially, I have the mission of bridging academia with business, because I see a huge gap between research, education, and the industry. For me, I am really passionate about connecting otherwise disconnected networks, especially in the global innovation community. And I want to do all it takes to empower innovation, especially early stage founders, and just to address all these issues that we've been experiencing, especially since COVID. And I wanted to also introduce my company Z-Lab, because that really shows my personal mission as well. As you see, LAB stands for linking academia with business. Of course, it's lab, right? So innovative, experimental, creative, but it stands for linking academia with business, because there's the gap. And then Z stands for really the last letter of the alphabet, new ideas, little ones, startups, just like a lot of us right now. And then you also notice that there's this network circle. This is based on my dissertation on social networks. It is really the core value of collective intelligence and social capital, which is what I'm trying to cultivate through this section, through this session as well. And then you also notice the rainbow colors, right? This is diversity because I believe diversity drives innovation. So that's, you know, my core value, and that's what what's been driving Z-Lab as well. So a quick overview, as I mentioned, the topic is the new era driving entrepreneurial, favoring entrepreneurial spirit. In other words, you know, I felt like we want to do the zoom in and zoom out. So, you know, so when we talk about entrepreneurial spirit, it sounds very egocentric, like it's about the person, you know, the founder or the innovator. But I also wanted to start from the bigger picture, because I think that, you know, the shifting environment we're in right now is really calling for that spirit. So I'm going to start by sharing, you know, my thoughts on the shifting economy, full of challenges, and then also to talk about the changes that's happening in organizational structure. So, you know, it's like, let's start from the bigger picture, and then we're going to zoom in little by little, and then we'll also talk about the challenges of corporate innovation. And then, of course, you know, speaking of entrepreneur, we need to talk about startup development, and also, you know, something that's core to my heart, diversity and innovation. And last, we're going to end with the resources and references that hopefully will help everybody to go further in your own journey. So I want to again invite everybody to, you know, put your thoughts in the chat window. I'm checking the chat, getting to know everybody. And also, if you have any question, please feel free to jump in at any time. So I have 3 housekeeping items on the slide just to, you know, remind everyone to input information. I'm going to share a spreadsheet for everybody. If you want to connect with each other, you can input your information in the spreadsheet, and then connect with each other on LinkedIn. I'm also going to send an invitation for you all to join a LinkedIn chat group so we can continue this discussion. All right, so let's get started with, you know, the changing economy and all these challenges. So I wanted to quickly share the UN Sustainable Development Goals. This is nothing new, but if you look at this, you know, it really, it's almost like, how can we not be working on this? Because it seems like after COVID, everything becomes more prominent than ever before. So, you know, speaking of poverty, hunger, health and well-being, education, gender equality, you know, all these issues, I'm not going to cover all 16, but essentially we are facing really, really a lot of challenges, and we need to really all step up, both as big corporations, but also as individual entrepreneurs, to find out ways to address these questions. So, you know, in the bigger picture, the economy is shifting, right? And it's not just since COVID. You know, the digitization process has been happening. So, you know, personally, my observation has been 3 stages. At the beginning, we were resisting. We were like, hey, we don't need technology, you know, we could do it. And then COVID happened. Everybody's like, oops, we need help. We need technology. We need the latest. So it's like, you know, we need technology. But then after that, you know, getting overwhelmed with all these, you know, new tools, we also need to pause and reflect and think about, wait a minute, technology needs us. You know, by the end of the day, we should be the starting point. The people should be the starting point, and also the ending point. You know, technology should be facilitating and serving people, and not like taking over. I felt like this is probably the struggle we have been experiencing in the past few months. But overall, that's also, you know, the relationship between people and technology. How can we optimize that so that technology can serve the best for our well-being? Because if you think about it, you know, what's happening nowadays is the application of artificial intelligence, automation. It feels like machines are taking over, you know, our jobs. A lot of people are losing their jobs. But, you know, are there things that we could do? So those are questions I want you guys to keep thinking. Now, zooming into the cooperation, in terms of organizational structure, this is also something I've been studying for the last 20 years in terms of how are we connected in an organization. So traditionally, I think everybody can reflect in your own organization, it's been a pyramid, right? It's been a hierarchical structure in a regular organization where there's the boss, and then there's the different level of managers, and then everybody's pretty much working on, in silo for their own, job description and all that. But then what's happening in the past 20 years, and also like very quickly since COVID, is the shift from this hierarchical structure of the organization to a team of networks. In other words, it's not going to be like there's a gatekeeper, information's disseminated that way. That has been very, old-fashioned, what do you say, industrial revolution period, where there's the authority that's defined by the gatekeeper of the information, and nobody has that information. Therefore, there's that structure, where you pass down information, you pass down orders, commands, and people at the bottom is just executing, not involved in the strategic planning process. But nowadays, as you see at the bottom of this slide, how things work are evolving into a network of teams, or say like each big network is composed of multiple sub-networks with people of shared value, shared culture, very transparent communication, free flow of information and feedback, where people are rewarded by their skills and abilities and not just their title and position. So this is what organizations are shifting in the bigger, digital economy background, because the way we share information is fundamentally changing how the way we're working in the future. So this is why we want to take a look at, the new era, right? Because in the economy, in the organization, essentially you are seeing this shift from this hierarchy to this network, or say ecosystem way of working. So another example, this comes from a study of McKinsey before COVID, where you can see the trends transforming the society, the economies, and industry and organizations. And that means, all the stakeholder, the technology and information talents are responding accordingly. So in other words, organizations used to be built as machines, but now organizations are transforming to a network of talents and act as organisms. So as you see, previously there's the hierarchy, top down, but now it's more, a network of teams where we are able to respond faster. And that's exactly why we need entrepreneurial spirit in the corporate setting. Because people, when we talk about entrepreneurial spirit, usually we would assume it's for startups, it's for founders. So I wanted to actually just reintroduce the entrepreneurial spirit to everybody. It's interesting, my dean at the University of St. Thomas, the Cameron School of Business, just said something today, that business schools should be incubators. And I really agree with that. We should be learning how do we make business work in business schools, and not just like, okay, my role is an accountant, or my role is a marketer. Like, we need to think about how we collaborate in the organization in a network ecosystem perspective, and no longer like the hierarchy. So I wanted to really, inject this before we get to the details, so that we know where we are in history and where we are in the organization, in the economy, in the society, because this is what's happening. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please keep the chat coming. I'm looking at the chat, and I'm also sending this invitation for people to join the LinkedIn group so that we can continue the discussion after this, because I'd love to hear your thoughts. As I said, it's a new era. Nobody knows what's the best practice, but we know that what we could do is keep on experimenting. And that's also, part of the entrepreneurial spirit, right? So again, going to, looking at corporate innovation, the sad news is corporate innovation has been declining. R&D has been declining since 1930s. In other words, this is also so-called innovator's dilemma. Like when corporate become big, it's almost inevitable that there's resistance to changes, right? If you think about Newton's law, that's the same thing. Like, when you become bigger corporations, there's more and more resistance to of innovation. We always talk about innovation. We need to remind ourselves that there's that resistance to change because continue with what we're going, the way it is. So this is what's happening in corporate America, that the dropping rate is about 5% every year, and that's really concerning. And if you look at the overall U.S. Entrepreneurial data, we are also, in decline. So that's the other thing. I want to start with problem. By the way, the other thing I wanted to share with you guys is, you think entrepreneurs start with ideas. I think ideas are overrated. We need to start with problems. Ideas are the solutions to the problems. We need to stay focused on these problems, which is why, we are reviewing these problems to see. And then very quickly, I'm reading the chat. I'm reading the marketing as evolving growth hacking. Okay, yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about growth hacking when we get there. So again, looking at corporate innovation and seeing what's happening, what is not working, what is working. So what's happening is there's the resistance in corporate innovation. And by comparison, if you look at the corporate, if you look at the companies that has been decentralizing their R&D, they are the ones that's more successful, more innovative. And, now I hope it starts to link, the network perspective with corporate innovation, right? Looking at this network of teams kind of self-organization visualization, you can see, where at the beginning you might have, okay, there's a center, but then the way we evolve in innovative or agile organizational structure is to eventually build your organization as network of teams. So that is also the way of decentralizing R&D, because over time, we need another lecture just to talk about social networks and how we maximize the collective intelligence and social capital. But you can see the evolving process from the left-hand side all the way from the central team to response team to hub and spokes with sub-teams to hub and spokes with additional sub-team and the network team. You can see it's a decentralizing process, unlike the hierarchical kind of traditional model. So essentially the answer to corporate innovation is to decentralize R&D and keep engaged with startups and entrepreneurs and founders, which also means it's an inside-out process. Like, corporate is also trying to encourage their employees' entrepreneurial spirit and mindset, because that means that you are constantly identifying problems, proposing solutions, ideas, and then if the culture is right, you can actually go ahead and execute it. So essentially, there needs to be a way of connecting the core of a firm and the peripheral, or say decentralized innovators or entrepreneurs for the changes to happen, which is again going back to the bigger picture of how can we almost like keep zoom in and zoom out, get the best out of each individual, but also work with the organizational culture, structure and respond to the bigger economy changes. So this is a white paper by High Alpha, proposing, identifying the challenges of corporate innovation, but also proposing the model for startup engagement, because what are the solutions? Right now, it's a lot of merge and acquisition, right? So if you look at how Apple came up with Siri, that is really from acquisition of a startup. So Apple got the technology and integrated and came up with Siri. Very similarly, Amazon came up with Alexa because of an acquisition of a startup. So essentially that has been the path. But then, of course, that is one solution. But how can we actually start from defining problem and partner or even co-build with startups so that we can address it's almost like instead of having the application, having the screening process, and almost like hit and miss kind of searching for startups to acquire, how can we identify our core challenges and do the discovery together, through partnership and through co-building. So, that's why there's all kinds of structure supporting startups. And that's something, I don't know if everybody's familiar with this world. Essentially, there's accelerators, incubators that's providing the space, the mentorship, sometimes curriculum, for you to go through the journey of starting your own business. In the meanwhile, on the funding side, we have business angels, we have VC funds that is injecting the financial capital. But there's a new model nowadays. Essentially, it was started by Bill Gross at Idea Lab in 1996, but didn't really take off in the United States. Instead, in the United States, accelerators and incubators are really, really popular. However, Europe picked it up, and there are really successful studios in Europe like eFounders and others that's been extremely successful in making startups by providing, both the human capital and the financial capital. Essentially, there's that chicken egg kind of process, right? When a founder has an idea, how are you going to be able to take the idea into a product and launch it to test the product market fit? But then on the other hand, the investors like, you need to show me something, right? So essentially, the founders are stuck because like, I need more support to be able to get there. But then the investors are also raising the bar in terms of, who am I going to be going with? Like, I really need to see some traction. So that's the difference between accelerator and a venture studio, or say a startup studio, where accelerator will take in a lot of startups. So it's, many bids, small investment, small equity, hoping for the unicorns. And then, venture studios, like, they only produce somewhere between 2 to 4 a year. Of course, bigger studio have more capacity, but then they are very much hands-on with large investment and of course a lot of equity and fewer bets. So that's the support structure. And I also wanted to give a quick overview so that you understand the ecosystem of startups and entrepreneurs, because this is extremely important, because usually a founder is in a very lonely journey, so to speak. It's not glory or vanity. It's really, you need to keep your head down, focus, but engaged in the ecosystem, which means, understand what are the resources are out there, including incubators, accelerators. There's a lot of government agencies that's providing resources, and universities, schools are also there, corporation, of course, investors. But then at the end of the day, I really wanted to emphasize the talent side, because what do you need the money for? It's really to recruit people to work together and make your dream come true. So keeping your relationships with talent, with customer, with suppliers, local community, and of course the media, influencer, these service providers, also very important. And the reason I wanted to give you the big picture is because, speaking of new era favoring entrepreneurial spirit, right now we're extremely fortunate to have this very supportive ecosystem in Houston and other places as well, because essentially, as I said, the lonely journey doesn't have to be that way. You can actually get more support in the ecosystem, and there are so many institutions, so many parties that can be involved and help you. But the core of this is still the innovators, the entrepreneurs, the startups, the scale up, which is why I put them in the center of this infographic, for us to understand they are the core, because they are the driver of economy of solution. So going back to this journey of filling the gap between all these advanced technology to the marketplace, here are the major gaps that I want to call, almost like invite you all to start thinking, either as a corporate innovator or individual entrepreneurs trying to start your own business. Essentially, we are not lack of technology, everyone. I mean, I know that it seems like the startup world is mostly the elites in Silicon Valley, like building things to the Mars. I wanted to say that, hey, we actually have a lot of technology. What's not happening is to bring the technology to the marketplace, especially serving those who are in need, right? I started by sharing the sustainable goals by UN because a lot of those communities that we need to serve, they are not necessarily looking for the breakthrough technology. Even just a little can help them enhance their well-being a whole lot. So what I wanted to emphasize is really technology transfer process. When we have that, how can we bring it to the marketplace, to the community, especially the underserved community, and make a big difference on the social and economic as impact? So that's really the biggest gap. The second one is the venture building, as I mentioned. The failure rate of startups is really high. So how can we avoid failure? How can we unstuck, especially in the early stage, because of lack of resources and connections? That's another challenge. The last one is also something I'd like to really specially emphasize on, because there's a lot of contribution that's being made by female, minority, and immigrant founders, but they are also facing even more hurdles when it comes to growth because of the cultural and economic disadvantages they're in. And honestly, these disadvantages are not defined by gender or ethnicity or where you're from. It's really it's not just because all these labels. It's really like the kind of resources. Do you have what it takes? Are you in the disadvantaged positions? So how can we actually help them? Because they're also like bring in a lot of insights in terms of what are the problems? How can we address these problems? So, at the end of the day, more work really needs to be done to address these challenges facing underrepresented communities, like digital divide, cultural divide. How can we bring everyone together in this, more polarized world? So these are the gaps in early stage startups that I wanted to, at least call for solutions. And then, this is something that I've been a strong advocate since the very beginning of COVID outbreak, because, everyone is feeling all these challenges, but what can I do? What can we do about it? So I wanted to look back at the last recession, and guess what? There were a lot of successful startups that were founded during last recession. At the time, of course, a lot of companies are failing, people are being laid off. But why is it the best time to start your business now? So a few reasons I wanted to share, my thoughts. Number one, again, it's driven by problems, right? We are facing more problems than ever before. We are facing problems in healthcare, in education, in energy, environment, you name it. I mean, we are experiencing it every day. I'm sure there are students among our audience, there are parents in our audience, maybe teachers too. The struggle we're facing just in education is tremendous, and not just because of lack of internet, lack of laptop. Even when you do have access, you're really tracing a dozen places to keep things in check. So how can we be more integrated? Because we have pieces of solutions like Zoom and WhatsApp, but they're not designed for education purposes, right? But then not every school have access to big systems like Blackboard and Canva. A lot of small schools, again, the little ones, they're lacking the solution of the problem they're facing. And it's actually been very costly to use the technology to keep everybody together because it's more work. I mean, that's the irony of utilizing technology, right? My starting point of like, okay, we need the technology, but we also need people to step up to solve these additional problems that's brought by technology. So that's the first reason. There are so many problems, but guess what? The bigger the problem, the bigger the opportunity. We need more solutions. And I think entrepreneurs and innovators, they are the ones that's coming up with ideas, coming up with solutions. The second reason is talents. Again, when you have the funding, what do you put the funding for? It's really talents you need. But right now we have this abundance of talents out there because of all these, layoffs, unemployment, and also like more flexibility at work. People can actually put their hours after work on something they're passionate about. That means you're also, having a higher chance of finding someone who can join your team and co-found and co-build your product with you. Number three is the disruption. The disruption happens by COVID. As unfortunate as it is, it also serves as the disruptor of a lot of existing system. As I said, the resistance to innovation is the biggest hurdle, but COVID actually did it for us. So in other words, people are actually more open to new things, more open to new ideas. This is also why in the last recession, these new apps, these new products were able to penetrate the market very quickly, because we're all looking for something new to address the problems we're facing. So we are actually more open-minded when it comes to product adoption. Speaking of the product life cycle, there's adoption, there's the introduction stage, growth stage, maturity, and decline. Usually the introduction stage is very slow because of the resistance, but guess what? Nowadays we can actually take something new very quickly. The next one is ecosystem, as I showed, right? This is really a summary where we are very fortunate to have a more mature ecosystem that supports us, supports our entrepreneurial efforts. And then the last one is future, because honestly, the future is here. There's no going back. I know a lot of, people are still talking about going back to normal. Guess what? This is the new normal. The future is already here. What we need to do is to embrace the future, which is why I started by this overview of where the economy is heading to, where the organizations are heading to. How can we facilitate corporate innovation? How can we also be the individual entrepreneurs that is, brave enough to take the risk and to start a business, to offer solution for the challenges we're facing. So that's a summary of why now is the best time to start your business. It's like calling your entrepreneurial spirit to take action. This is also something, I wrote early on when everyone is struggling and hoping for recovery. We need to really, work on recovery and not just wait for recovery. So, when you're feeling the dark, turn on your beacon and be a lighthouse, because the world needs you now. So that's sort of the takeaway I'm hoping. And this is, a quick summary. And I want to at least open up for discussion and address the question that's been coming from chat window. So again, let me stop sharing and coming back to the session. I have some other references I'd like to share. I'll be happy to also, provide the books, my favorite references. But I also have some data that shows foreign-born founders' success story, success rate. And I wanted to see, if you guys have any thoughts, any questions. And again, I'd love to continue the discussion after the session. So I didn't put a lot of time on defining the skill set, and I just wanted to really give the big overview, because I want to focus on the new era. and wake up your entrepreneurial spirit. I think it's in everybody. I really believe it is in everybody. It's just a matter of timing and the external environment, the interaction between, you know, where you are as individual and where the world is, and when you're going to be stepping up. Because if we think about it, you know, I teach entrepreneurial class, master's class. That's another story. You know, we talk about all the skill sets, all the knowledge base, but I really wanted to focus on the spirit today, and, you know, really just call that in everybody, and hopefully, you know, continue this discussion for everyone to consider your own journey to contributing innovation. Okay, so now let's get back to some of the questions in the chat window. We have the growth hacking. So, you know, this is also a topic I'd love to elaborate, because as a marketing professor, I wanted to redefine your understanding of marketing, because I think we assume the default definition as promotion, but guess what? That is actually a very small part of marketing. I wanted to give a little infographic so that, you know, we can talk about the growth hacking, because it is actually part of it. So this is what a marketing should include. As you see, the promotion is really part of it. It also includes product, price, and place, which are the 4 P's, but it starts with the target market as the entire marketing strategy. But that, again, is driven by the external environment, which is also today's approach, my approach for today, to look at overview. So marketing should be driving innovation and not an afterthought. What do I mean by this? Usually when we work with a company, especially startups, they're building their product, and then when they're ready to launch, they are looking for help, you know, from marketers. Now that we're running campaigns, we're doing the sales, we need marketing. Guess what? That's too late. You really need to start by the research. You know, again, problem identification. The market research should be driving your product design, your development, your iteration of keep checking on product market fit, and not just like, okay, we're ready to launch and, you know, use marketing as an afterthought. So growth hacking is sort of that kind of approach where you use marketing to facilitate the growth of your organization. But I also wanted to differentiate strategy versus tactics. I know a lot of growth hackers are more focused on the tactics. They use tools to gain followers, to, you know, run viral campaign. That's all good, but again, the right way of doing it is really 3 steps. If I could simplify it, we need to start from research and analytics. Again, you know, you need to understand the problems your customers are facing. That needs to happen constantly, not just like, okay, you know, my product is ready, let's run some tests. You need to start doing that even before you develop your product. And then once you have the insights from your customer, by the way, you should also be looking at your competitors. And analysis, the research done, then you move on to your strategic planning. And that is the marketing strategy, where you decide your target market, you decide your differentiation, your positioning, and then you design your product around it, you design your branding, you design your channel of distribution, your pricing is part of it too, and then your promotion strategy. And that's all, you know, that's all one integrated process, and not just, okay, go promote. Which is why marketing department shouldn't be just a department. If you look at the most successful companies like Apple, Google, these are marketing companies. Apple is not a technology company, guys. Google is not a technology company. They're a marketing company, because they're always driven by the needs of the customers, by user experience. So that should be really the driver of your business, and that applies to all businesses, including big corporations, small startups. And startups usually, you know, don't follow the system because of lack of resources. They don't really have the bandwidth to do that. And, you know, corporate usually have more resources. They have designated department to do the research, to do the strategy, do the implementation. So to answer your question, very, growth hacking should take the spirit of having marketing drive a company growth, but be very careful not to fall into the tactics. If you fall into tactics, what happens is marketing becomes a money burning function when it should be a revenue generating function. All right, and that's really the core of having the research, identifying the problem, finding the solution. In other words, I felt like the whole process is the entrepreneurial spirit, where you start with a problem, you take all you do all it takes with the resources, be very resourceful, be very persistent, have the grit, and not afraid of failure. Really, failure is really part of it, because failure is how you learn. Like, if I have some examples, all the successful innovators, they have it, we've heard stories about inventing light bulbs with 99 failure and 1 success. That's how you learn how things work. That's actually part of the iteration and part of your research process. You're only gaining the insights through testing and through learning. And I also felt like I hope one day the business school is almost like the school of business and entrepreneurship, and not just like there's a major or minor, because it really, regardless of whether you have a career path in corporate or in the startup world, the whole system of growing and sustaining the growth and revenue generation is all driven by the entrepreneurial system, and starting with the spirit, and that applies for nonprofit organization too. So hopefully everyone has a little takeaway, and I'd love to check to see if any more question that's coming up. There's one, if we have the time. Yahan, you think we do? Okay, what are the ways one can discover or refine their own entrepreneurial spirit and skills early on in their journey? So I would say this is really in everything you do, and not just when you are starting your own business. For example, you're hosting events, right? You're identifying speakers, identifying topics, identifying formats. The whole entrepreneurial spirit or skill set is lied in the process of problem solving. I know that in education we emphasize a lot on critical thinking, right? We always talk about critical thinking. I actually want to emphasize on creative problem solving, because I think, to answer your question, to discover and refine our entrepreneurial spirit and skills, it's really the whole process of problem solving. Problem solving starts with identifying the problem itself. Again, I think that has been not emphasized enough, the problem identification. Sometimes when you are seeing problem, you're only seeing the symptoms and not the problem behind it. It's almost like, think about a doctor, someone is sneezing. It could be cold, but could be an allergy, right? That is the problem behind it. So just having the insight is where you start, right? But then you also want to identify your goals and then have creative alternatives. So that's the idea generation. That's the creativity part. But that's not enough. Entrepreneurial are not just creatives. They're also analytical thinkers. If you think about your brain, left side of the brain and right side of the brain, you actually need to keep going back and forth, generate ideas, and then evaluate. The financial analysis of decision tree, consequence table, matrices are extremely important, because at the end of the day, it is the return on investment we're looking at. That's also the difference between creativity and innovation. These two words are often used interchangeably, but they mean different things. Innovation, of course, starts from creativity, but you really need to convert that into value to be called innovation. So we need to execute, we need to implement and make the impact to bring in the innovation, which is why we need the creative, the intuitive, but we also need the analytical. So I think that covers the entrepreneurial spirit and skill set. because it is really in everything you do. So in the company setting, for example, we all see problems, but do we just stay quiet and pretend everything's perfectly perfect? Or do we, step up and address it? It has a lot to do with, with the culture of the organization, of course, but at least, starting from you, right? We are the change we have been waiting for. Make the change we want to see. And that is really, the entrepreneurial spirit. First of all, find the problem, imagine the change, and then connect the dots, from all it takes to solve the problem. So I would say, keep practicing this in your everyday life until one day you have your own business. But it is really in everything you do. And I wanted to, again, encourage everyone to start exploring, because this is the time. This is the time to take the entrepreneurial spirit and step up and have your own business, because there are so many problems that we can address. And again, you don't need the most advanced technology. I mean, Elon Musk is a great hero. This year, lots of great happenings. But I also wanted to say that there are tons of people that can benefit from technology. And how can we do something to bring the technology to the vast emerging markets, bottom of the pyramid? They are here, they are everywhere in the world, but they're also here, right here in Houston. So I hope that helps, Johan. All right.
Well, thank you, Dr. Zhang. That was wonderful. We appreciate your time in telling us about this entrepreneurial spirit, and pretty much spending your time here with us. Just a reminder for everyone, in case you missed part of it, this program will be uploaded on YouTube in the coming days, so check out World Affairs Council of Greater Houston's YouTube channel. We'll be having that up there for y'all. And if anyone wants to get in contact with Dr. Zhang, like I said, you can get in touch with her with LinkedIn, and we do also have, she does have her website, zlabglobal.com. Feel free to check that out as well. That's it. Any last words, Dr. Zhang?
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. I look forward to connecting with everybody and continue the conversation, the discussion. Thanks again for the World Affairs Council. You guys have been doing an amazing job. Hey, Jose, good to see you here. I also, one final word. I am doing research on disadvantaged founders and entrepreneurs. So I'd love to have a call for participation of this research. If you are female or minority or a foreign-born founder, or have moved from another state to Texas in the past few years, because that's also migrating entrepreneurs, we'd love to hear your thoughts, find out more about your journey, learn about, your experience, and address all these challenges you're facing. So again, if you are a female, minority, foreign-born, or moved from another state to Texas, I'd love to talk to you. Please reach out. Thank you for reminding me to send this message, because I really do care about the disadvantaged entrepreneurs and wanted to do my best to support their efforts.
Well, thank you again, and thank you for everything that you do, Dr. Zhang. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for attending. I'm glad to have you, and I look forward to seeing you at our future programs. Everyone, stay safe and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.